The snow fell heavy that March evening in 1878, covering the streets of Redemption Creek, Wyoming, in a blanket of white that muffled every sound. Inside the small church at the edge of town, Reverend Matthews stood before a pine coffin, his voice steady, despite the tragedy before him. "We commend Martha Brennan's soul to the Lord," he intoned, his breath visible in the cold air. The church stove had gone out hours ago, and no one had bothered to relight it. There were only 5 people in attendance, after all, and 3 of them were children. Sarah Brennan stood with her arms around her 2 younger siblings, trying to keep them warm and quiet. At 22, she'd become their mother in everything but name, when their real mother had taken ill 6 months ago. Now, watching them lower Mama into the frozen ground, she was all they had left. 10-year-old Thomas pressed his face into her worn coat, his thin shoulders shaking with silent sobs. 8-year-old Emma clutched Sarah's hand so tightly her fingers had gone numb. The little girl's eyes were dry. She'd cried herself out over the past 3 days, but her face was pale as the snow outside. "Where will we go now?" Emma whispered as the Reverend finished his prayer. Sarah had no answer. The boarding house where they'd been living had already given them notice. Their room had to be cleared out by tomorrow morning. Mama's death meant the end of the meager income she'd brought in from taking in washing, and Sarah's own job at the general store barely paid enough to feed herself, let alone 3 people. "We'll figure something out," Sarah murmured, though her heart was heavy with doubt. She had exactly $4.30 to her name. In Wyoming territory in the dead of winter, that might as well have been nothing. After the brief service, they walked back through the snow to the boarding house. Mrs. Hutchins met them at the door, her face showing more irritation than sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I need that room cleared by morning," she said bluntly. "I've got a paying tenant moving in tomorrow afternoon." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied quietly, ushering the children inside and up to their tiny room. It held a narrow bed that she'd shared with Emma, a cot where Thomas slept, and a single wooden chair. Their possessions fit into 2 carpet bags and a battered trunk. That night, Sarah sat by the window long after the children had cried themselves to sleep, watching the snow continue to fall and trying to devise a plan. She'd already asked everyone she knew for help. The shopkeeper had been sympathetic but firm. He couldn't afford to pay her more, and he certainly couldn't house 3 people. The other boarding houses in town were full or too expensive. She'd even swallowed her pride and gone to the church. But Reverend Matthews had 8 children of his own, and barely enough to feed them. His wife had pressed 2 loaves of bread into Sarah's hands with tears in her eyes, but that was all they could spare. As dawn broke grey and cold, Sarah made her decision. She would take the children to the homestead office and see if there were any families looking for help. Maybe a ranch needed a cook and housekeeper, someone who wouldn't mind taking on 2 extra children. It was a slim hope, but it was all she had. She woke Thomas and Emma gently, helped them dress in their warmest clothes, and together they carried their belongings down the stairs. Mrs. Hutchins watched from her kitchen doorway as they left, her expression unreadable. The wind had picked up overnight, turning the snowfall into a proper blizzard. Sarah pulled Emma's shawl tighter around the little girl's shoulders and took Thomas's hand. The homestead office was 6 blocks away, and every step was a battle against the wind. They were halfway there when Emma stumbled, her legs giving out from cold and exhaustion. Sarah caught her, but the weight of the child and the carpet bag she carried threw her off balance. She went down hard on one knee in the snow, crying out as pain shot through her leg. "Sarah!" Thomas's voice was high with panic as he tried to help her up. She struggled to her feet, but her knee buckled. The fall had twisted something badly. She could barely put weight on it, and they were still 3 blocks from shelter with the blizzard worsening by the minute. "We have to keep moving," she gasped, trying to hide her pain from the children. But each step was agony, and she knew they wouldn't make it much farther. That's when she heard the sound of hoofbeats, heavy and steady through the storm. A massive dark horse emerged from the white curtain of snow, and atop it sat a man who seemed carved from the mountains themselves. He was tall, taller than any man Sarah had ever seen, with broad shoulders wrapped in a heavy sheepskin coat. His hat was pulled low against the wind, shadowing a face that was all hard angles and weathered skin. But his eyes, when they met hers, were the color of a summer sky, and they held something she hadn't expected: concern. "You're hurt," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel. It wasn't a question. "We're fine," Sarah lied, even as her knee threatened to give out again. "We just need to—" "You're not fine, and you won't make it another block in this storm." He dismounted in one fluid motion, and Sarah's breath caught at the sheer size of him. He had to be 6.5 feet tall, with hands that looked like they could snap a tree branch without effort. "Where are you trying to get to?" "The homestead office," she managed, clutching Emma tighter. The little girl had started to shiver violently. The man's jaw tightened. "That's closed. Storm warning came through last night. Everything's shut down until this passes." He looked at the children, then back at Sarah. "Where are you staying?" Sarah's voice broke despite her best efforts. "We have nowhere. Our mother died last night. We have nowhere to go." For a moment, the man just stared at her, those blue eyes searching her face. Then he moved, quick and decisive, scooping Emma up in one arm like she weighed nothing at all. "Can you ride?" he asked Sarah. Yes, but..." "Then you'll ride. The boy can sit with you. My place is a mile out, but it's warm and it's dry." He fixed her with a look that was both gentle and absolutely firm. "You'll freeze to death out here, all three of you. I won't allow that." "We can't impose on a stranger," Sarah protested weakly, even as relief flooded through her. "Name's Cole Barrett. Now, we're not strangers." He boosted Thomas up onto the horse, then turned to help Sarah. His hands were careful on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle, and she felt the strength in them even through her coat. "Hold on to the boy. I'll walk and lead the horse." "But you'll freeze," she said. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "Ma'am, I've worked cattle drives in blizzards that would make this look like a spring rain. I'll be fine." True to his word, Cole Barrett walked through the storm without complaint, one arm holding Emma against his chest, the other hand steady on his horse's reins. Sarah couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, but he seemed to know exactly where he was going, his steps never faltering. The mile felt like 10, but finally shapes emerged from the white, a barn, a fence line, and then a house. It was a simple structure, sturdy and well-built, with smoke rising from its chimney. Cole led them straight to the porch, set Emma down gently, and then helped Sarah dismount. "Get them inside," he said, pressing a key into Thomas's hand. "Fire's still going. I need to stable the horse." The interior of the house was blessedly warm. Sarah sank onto a chair near the fire, her injured knee throbbing, while Thomas and Emma huddled close to the flames. The room was neat and spare, a man's home with nothing extra or decorative, but everything clean and well-maintained. Cole returned a few minutes later, brushing snow from his coat. He hung it by the door, revealing a flannel shirt that stretched across his broad chest and arms, thick with muscle. Sarah felt her face heat and quickly looked away. "Let me see that knee," he said, kneeling in front of her. "It's fine, really. Miss, I don't mean any disrespect, but you can barely stand. Let me look at it." His hands were surprisingly gentle as he examined her leg through her skirt, his touch careful and professional. "Twisted, not broken. You'll need to stay off it for a few days. I'll wrap it for you." He retrieved a clean cloth from a cupboard and bandaged her knee with practiced efficiency. When he was done, he stood and looked at the three of them. 2 children and a young woman, all exhausted and grieving, and at the end of their rope. "You'll stay here until the storm passes," he said. "After that, we'll figure something out." "Mr. Barrett, we couldn't possibly—" Sarah began. "You can, and you will." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "I've got a spare room with 2 beds. Children will sleep there. You can take the main bedroom. I'll bunk in the barn." "Absolutely not," Sarah protested. "We won't put you out of your own home. The barn's insulated and heated. I've slept there plenty of times during calving season." He turned to stoke the fire, his back to them. "Besides, I prefer it." There was something in his voice, a note of pain or perhaps loneliness, that made Sarah bite back further protests. This man was helping them when no one else would. The least she could do was accept his hospitality with grace. "Thank you, Mr. Barrett," she said softly. "We're truly grateful." He glanced over his shoulder at her, and for just a moment, his hard expression softened. Cole, just Cole. That first night, Sarah lay awake in Cole Barrett's bed, which he'd insisted she take despite her protests, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. Her mother was dead. They were homeless, and now they were staying with a strange man who lived alone at the edge of town. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something close to safe. The storm raged for 3 days, During that time, Sarah discovered that Cole Barrett was a man of few words but considerable action. He cooked simple but hearty meals, stews and biscuits, and thick slices of bacon. He never spoke unless spoken to first, but he was never unkind. He showed Thomas how to care for the horses and let Emma help him feed the chickens, treating both children with a quiet patience that surprised Sarah. On the second day, when Sarah's knee had improved enough for her to hobble around, she insisted on helping with the cooking and cleaning. Cole had protested, but she'd been firm. "You've given us shelter and food," she said. "The least I can do is earn our keep." He'd looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in those blue eyes. "You don't owe me anything." "Perhaps not," she'd replied, "but I need to do this, please." He'd nodded once and stepped aside. Working alongside him in the small kitchen, Sarah found herself stealing glances when she thought he wasn't looking. Cole Barrett was a mystery. He was clearly a man of means. The house and barn were well maintained, his horses were quality animals, and he had enough supplies stored to last months, yet he lived alone, with no neighbors for miles. She noticed other things too. The way his hands, so large and calloused from work, could be incredibly gentle when he helped Emma with her coat or steadied Thomas on the fence. The way he always gave the children the best portions of food at meals. The way he turned his face away when he thought Sarah might cry, giving her privacy in her grief. On the third night, after the children had gone to bed, Sarah sat by the fire, mending one of Thomas's shirts. Cole was at the table, going over what looked like account books by lamplight. The domestic scene felt surreal, almost like they were a family instead of strangers thrown together by circumstance. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah ventured. Cole looked up, his expression guarded. "You can ask. Why are you helping us? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his pencil and met her eyes. "I had a family once," he said slowly. "Wife and a daughter. Emma would be about your sister's age now." Sarah's breath caught. "Would be? Fever took them both 5 years ago. I couldn't save them." His jaw clenched, and Sarah saw the old pain in his eyes, still raw after all this time. "I had everything a man could want, and I lost it all in the space of a week. Since then, I've been alone. Preferred it that way. Easier to hurt when there's no one left to lose." "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. Cole shook his head. "Don't be. It's old pain." He paused, then continued. "When I saw you three in that storm, freezing and desperate, I saw what I couldn't be for my own family. A chance to actually help someone when it mattered. Maybe I'm being selfish, but I couldn't leave you there." Sarah set aside her mending and limped over to the table, ignoring the protest from her knee. She placed her hand over his, feeling the rough calluses and warmth of his skin. "That's not selfishness, Cole. That's goodness, and I'm grateful for it." His hand turned under hers, his palm pressing against hers for just a moment. The touch sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire. Then he pulled away, standing abruptly. "You should rest. Your knee needs time to heal." His voice was rough, almost gruff. "Cole, good night, Sarah." He was gone before she could say more, the door closing quietly behind him as he headed out to the barn. Sarah sat at the table, her hand still tingling from his touch, her heart beating faster than it should. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel drawn to this silent, wounded man. She had Thomas and Emma to think about, a future to secure. She couldn't afford to develop feelings for anyone, least of all someone who'd made it clear he preferred being alone. But as she made her way to bed that night, she couldn't deny the truth. Cole Barrett was breaking through the walls around her heart, one small kindness at a time. The storm broke on the fourth day, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Cole woke before dawn, as was his habit, and found Sarah already in the kitchen, starting the fire in the stove. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. She turned, and he was struck by how beautiful she looked in the early morning light, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. She'd looked worn and desperate when he'd found her in the storm. Now, rested and recovered, she was breathtaking. "I've been thinking," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Now that the storm's over, we need to make plans. I can't impose on your hospitality forever." Cole poured himself coffee, buying time to think. He'd been dreading this conversation. The truth was, he didn't want them to leave. For the first time in 5 years, his house felt like a home instead of just a place to sleep. Emma's laughter reminded him of his daughter. Thomas's eager questions as they did chores together filled a silence he hadn't realized was crushing him. And Sarah made him remember what it felt like to be a man instead of just a ghost going through the motions. "Where would you go?" he asked, instead of saying what he really wanted to say. "I'll find work, maybe at one of the ranches outside town. They might need a cook or housekeeper, someone who could bring the children along. And if they don't," her face fell, revealing the fear she'd been trying to hide, "then I'll figure something else out. I always do." Cole set down his coffee cup, his mind made up. What he was about to propose was crazy, impulsive, and probably the worst decision he could make, but he was going to make it anyway. "I have another option," he said slowly. "You could stay here." Sarah blinked. What? Stay here? All three of you?" He forced himself to meet her eyes, to lay his cards on the table. "I need help running this place. I've got 100 acres, 20 head of cattle, and more work than one man can handle alone. You need a home and security for your brother and sister. We could help each other." "Cole, I couldn't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering." He took a breath, steadying himself. "There's one condition, though." "What condition?" "We'd have to be married." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah stared at him, her face cycling through shock, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite read. "Married," she repeated faintly. "4 appearances," he clarified quickly. "This is a small town, Sarah. A young woman living alone with a single man would destroy your reputation, make life hard for the children. But as my wife, you'd be respected, protected. You'd have a home and security, and so would Thomas and Emma. But you don't. I mean, we barely know each other. I know you're a hard worker. I know you're devoted to your brother and sister. I know you're strong enough to walk 3 blocks on a twisted knee in a blizzard rather than give up." His voice softened. "That's enough for me. The rest we'd figure out as we go." Sarah moved to the window, staring out at the snow-covered fields. Cole watched her, his heart pounding harder than it had any right to. He'd convinced himself this was just a practical arrangement, a way to solve both their problems. But the truth was more complicated. He wanted her to stay, because somewhere in the past few days she'd become important to him. They all had. This house had been dead and silent for 5 years, and now it was alive again. He wasn't ready to let that go. "What would you expect from this arrangement?" Sarah asked quietly, not turning around. Cole understood what she was really asking. "Separate rooms. You'd keep the main bedroom. I'd stay in the spare room after we moved the children to the loft. I built it years ago, for when Emma got older. I won't press you for anything you're not willing to give. This would be a practical arrangement, nothing more." "Nothing more," she echoed, and he thought he heard disappointment in her voice. But when she turned to face him, her expression was composed. "And if one of us wants to end it, then we end it. I'd make sure you and the children were taken care of, set up somewhere safe. You'd never have to worry about that." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. Cole forced himself to wait, to let her make the decision without pressure. This had to be her choice. Finally, she spoke. "I need to think about it, and I need to talk to Thomas and Emma. They deserve a say in this." "Of course," Cole agreed, relief and something warmer flooding through him. She hadn't said no. That had to mean something. "But Cole," she added, meeting his eyes, "if we do this, I want you to know something. I won't be a burden to you. I'll work hard, I'll help however I can, and I'll do my best to make this arrangement work. I need to know you're sure. Once we do this, there's no going back." "I'm sure," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The rest of that day passed in a strange sort of tension. Sarah disappeared with Thomas and Emma into the spare room for a long conversation. Cole busied himself with chores, trying not to imagine what they were saying, whether the children would accept him, whether Sarah would ultimately decide this was too risky. That evening, as he came in from the barn, he found all 3 of them waiting in the main room. Sarah stood with a hand on each child's shoulder, her face serious but calm. "We've talked," she said, "and we've made a decision." Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. "And Emma wants to know if she can still help feed the chickens every morning." A smile tugged at his lips despite his nervousness. "Every morning. And Thomas wants to learn to ride properly. not just sit on a horse while someone else leads it. I can teach him. Sarah took a deep breath. And I want to know if you're absolutely certain about this. Because if you are, if you truly mean everything you said, then yes, we'll stay. I'll marry you, Cole Barrett. The relief that crashed through him was so intense he had to lock his knees to stay standing. I'm certain. Then we should probably discuss the practical details, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. When would this happen? How would we explain it to the town? Cole moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, to smell the faint scent of soap and flour that clung to her. We'll go into town tomorrow. Tell folks we've been courting in secret, that I proposed, and you accepted. Given the circumstances, a quick marriage won't raise too many eyebrows. And after? How do we? She trailed off, color rising in her cheeks. We take it day by day, Cole said softly. No pressure, no expectations, just figuring things out as we go. She nodded and he saw her shoulders relax slightly. All right then, day by day. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Cole sat by the fire working on his account books while Sarah mended by lamplight. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that he had to keep reminding himself this was real. Tomorrow he would ride into town and arrange to marry this woman. In a few days, she would legally be his wife. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in 5 years. Cole, Sarah's voice broke into his thoughts. Can I ask you something else? He set down his pencil. Always. Your wife and daughter, what were their names? The question caught him off guard. Most people avoided mentioning his lost family, as if not talking about them would somehow hurt less. But Sarah's question wasn't morbid curiosity. It was genuine interest, a desire to know him better. Anne, he said quietly. My wife's name was Anne, and our daughter was Emily. Tell me about them. So he did. He told her about Anne's laugh, bright and infectious, and how she could make even the hardest day better with just a smile. He told her about Emily, who'd been 4 years old when the fever took her, full of questions and mischief and love. He told her about the dreams they'd had, more children, a thriving ranch, growing old together, watching their grandchildren play. Sarah listened without interrupting, her hands still on her mending, tears shining in her eyes. When he finished, she set aside her work and moved to sit beside him on the bench. They sound wonderful, she said softly. I'm so sorry you lost them. I am too, Cole admitted. Every day. But you know what I've learned this week? What? That maybe it's possible to be grateful for what I had while still being open to what might come next. Anne wouldn't have wanted me to be alone forever. She'd have wanted me to live. Sarah's hand found his, her fingers warm and small against his palm. I think she'd be glad you're helping us, that you're not alone anymore. Cole turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture was simple, intimate, and it sent heat curling through his chest. I'm glad too, he murmured. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, staring into the fire, and Cole allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement would become something more. The wedding took place 3 days later in the same church where they'd buried Sarah's mother. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with obvious confusion. He'd had no idea Cole Barrett was courting anyone, let alone ready to marry. But he asked no uncomfortable questions. Sarah wore her only decent dress, a simple grey wool that she'd hastily altered to fit better. Cole wore his best shirt and vest, his hair freshly trimmed. Thomas and Emma stood as witnesses, both children scrubbed clean and dressed in clothes Cole had bought them from the general store the day before. Do you, Cole Matthew Barrett, take Sarah Louise Brennan to be your lawfully wedded wife? The Reverend intoned. I do, Cole said firmly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. And do you, Sarah Louise Brennan, take Cole Matthew Barrett to be your lawfully wedded husband? Sarah's voice was clear and steady. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. This was the moment Cole had been dreading. They hadn't discussed this part, and he didn't want to presume. But Sarah solved the problem by rising on her toes and pressing a soft, brief kiss to his lips. It was over in a heartbeat, proper and appropriate for a church wedding. But Cole felt that kiss all the way to his bones. They signed the marriage certificate, accepted congratulations from the handful of townsfolk who'd gathered out of curiosity, and rode back to the ranch in Cole's wagon. Thomas and Emma chatted excitedly about the ceremony, but Cole and Sarah were quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. Back at the house, Cole carried their packages inside while Sarah helped the children out of their good clothes. When he came back downstairs, she was in the kitchen starting dinner, moving around his space, their space now, with practiced ease. "Sarah," he said, and she turned. "I got you something, a wedding present." He handed her a small, wrapped package, suddenly feeling foolish. It wasn't much, just something he'd picked up in town on impulse, but he'd wanted to give her something to mark the day. Sarah unwrapped it carefully, and her breath caught. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain, simple but beautiful. "Cole, this is too much," she protested. "Open it," he said quietly. She did, and found a small photo inside. The one Reverend Matthews had taken of her with Thomas and Emma at their mother's funeral. Cole had borrowed it and had it sized to fit the locket, "so you always have them close to your heart," he explained, feeling heat creep up his neck. "Your family." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "Help me put it on." He moved behind her, his fingers clumsy with the tiny clasp. Her neck was so delicate, her hair soft where it brushed against his hands. He wanted to press his lips to the curve where her neck met her shoulder, to pull her back against his chest and hold her. Instead, he fastened the clasp and stepped away quickly. "There." Sarah touched the locket, then turned to face him. "Thank you, Cole. This means more than you know. You're my wife now," he said, the words still strange on his tongue. "I want you to be happy here." "I am happy," she said softly, "happier than I ever thought I'd be again." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Emma called from upstairs, asking for help with something, and the spell broke. That night, after the children were asleep in the loft, Cole had finished preparing. He stood outside the closed door to the main bedroom, Sarah's bedroom now. He could hear her moving around inside, getting ready for bed. This was their wedding night. In normal circumstances, he'd be in there with her, but these weren't normal circumstances, and he'd promised her separate rooms, no pressure. Still, as he made his way to the spare room, he couldn't help but wish things were different. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment for everyone. Cole had lived alone for so long that having 3 other people in his house felt strange, even when it was a good strange. He had to remember to be quieter in the mornings, to knock before entering rooms, to share the space that had been exclusively his. But the changes were good ones. The house was warmer, fuller, alive in ways it hadn't been in years. Emma's laughter rang through the rooms. Thomas's questions filled the silence. And Sarah was everywhere. In the kitchen, humming as she cooked. In the garden, planning what to plant come spring. At the dinner table, mediating disputes between the children with patience and humor. In every corner of the house, making it a home instead of just a place to sleep. Cole found himself watching her constantly. The way she pushed her hair back when she was concentrating. The way she bit her lower lip when she was worried. The way her face lit up when one of the children accomplished something new. The way she looked in the evening light, peaceful and beautiful. He was falling for his own wife, and he had no idea what to do about it. For her part, Sarah seemed content with their arrangement. She worked hard, never complained, and treated him with respect and growing affection. But she maintained a careful distance, never crossing the invisible line they'd drawn between them. The morning of their second week together, Sarah woke to find the house empty, except for a note on the kitchen table in Cole's rough handwriting. "Gone to check the north pasture. Back by supper. There's coffee on the stove." She smiled at his thoughtfulness, poured herself a cup, and set about making breakfast for the children. As she worked, she found herself humming, something she hadn't done since before Mama got sick. The realization made her pause, wooden spoon halfway to the mixing bowl. She was happy, genuinely, unexpectedly happy. When had that happened? When had this arrangement stopped feeling temporary and started feeling like home? "Sarah?" Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her nightgown. "Can I help make the biscuits?" "Of course, sweetheart. Go wash your hands and put on your apron." They worked together in comfortable silence, Emma's small hands carefully cutting circles in the dough, while Sarah prepared the rest of the meal. Through the window, she could see Thomas in the barn, following Cole's instructions from the previous day about feeding the horses. They were becoming a family. The thought filled her with warmth and a touch of fear. What if Cole changed his mind? What if he decided this was too much, too complicated? "What if you're thinking too hard again?" Emma observed, looking up at her with eyes far too knowing for an 8-year-old. Sarah laughed. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just noticed." Emma placed the last biscuit on the pan with exaggerated care. "Are you worried about Cole?" "What makes you think that?" "Because you get this little wrinkle right here." Emma pointed to the space between Sarah's eyebrows. "When you're worried about something. And you've been getting it a lot when you look at him." Sarah sighed, sliding the biscuits into the oven. "I just want to make sure we're not imposing, that he doesn't regret taking us in." "He doesn't," Emma said with absolute certainty. "He looks at you the way Papa used to look at Mama before Papa died, like you're something precious." The observation made Sarah's breath catch. "Emma, and you look at him the same way, so I don't understand why you're both being so silly about it." Before Sarah could respond, the kitchen door burst open and Thomas ran in, his face flushed with excitement. "Sarah, Cole's teaching me to rope. He says I've got natural talent." The boy was practically vibrating with pride. "Can I practice more after breakfast?" "If Cole says it's all right." Sarah agreed, her heart warming at the boy's enthusiasm. Thomas had been so quiet since Mama died, retreating into himself. Seeing him excited about something again was a gift. Cole returned just as Sarah was setting the table, stamping snow from his boots at the door. His eyes found hers immediately, and something passed between them, a connection that made her pulse quicken. "Smells good," he said, hanging his coat and hat by the door. "Emma helped with the biscuits," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Then I'm sure they'll be the best part of the meal." Cole ruffled Emma's hair as he passed, making the little girl beam. They ate together, the conversation flowing easily. Thomas chattered about his progress with roping. Emma described the pattern she wanted to plant in the garden come spring, and Cole listened to both children with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions. Sarah watched them, her heart full. This was what a family was supposed to feel like: safe, warm, right. After breakfast, while the children went to do their chores, Sarah started washing the dishes. She was elbow deep in soapy water when Cole appeared beside her with a dish towel. "You don't have to," she began. "I know," he said simply, taking a clean plate and drying it. "But I want to." They worked in companionable silence for several minutes. Sarah was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the warmth of his body, the brush of his sleeve against hers, the way his large hands handled the dishes with surprising gentleness. "Sarah," Cole said finally, his voice quiet, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy here, truly happy?" She turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his eyes. "Yes," she said honestly. "More than I ever expected to be." "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know that you're not just settling, that this arrangement isn't making you miserable." Sarah set down the dish she'd been washing and dried her hands on her apron. "Cole Barrett, look at me." When he did, she continued, "I'm not miserable. I'm not settling. What we have here, you, me, the children, it's more than I ever dared hope for. You've given us a home, security and kindness. That's not nothing, but is it enough?" The question was barely above a whisper. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. This was it, the moment where they could either maintain the careful distance they'd established or step into something deeper. She thought of Emma's words earlier, about being silly. Maybe it was time to be brave. "Is what we have now enough?" she repeated slowly. "Or are you asking if I want more?" Cole's throat worked as he swallowed. I'm asking if there's a chance that someday this could be more than just a practical arrangement, that we could be..." He trailed off, looking uncertain. "A real marriage," Sarah finished softly. "A real family?" "Yes." She reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the counter. His hand was so much larger than hers, calloused from years of hard work, but warm and steady. "Cole, I think we're already becoming that. At least, I feel like we are. Every day, a little more." His fingers curled around hers, holding tight. "I feel it too," he admitted. "I just didn't know if you wanted..." "I want," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I want this to be real. I want us to be a real family. I want..." She paused, gathering her courage. "I want you, Cole, not just as a provider or protector, but as my husband, truly my husband." For a moment, Cole just stared at her, his blue eyes intense. Then he raised his free hand and cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that," he murmured. "Then why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't want to pressure you. Didn't want you to feel obligated." His voice was rough with emotion. "You've been through so much, Sarah, lost so much. I wanted to give you time to heal, to be sure." "I am sure," she whispered. "I've been sure for days now. I was just afraid you didn't feel the same way." Cole laughed, a sound of pure relief. "We're a pair of fools, aren't we?" "Apparently so." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Sarah didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that surprised her. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like their brief wedding kiss. This was slow and sweet and full of promise. Cole's hand slid from her face to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, while his other hand remained clasped with hers. Sarah sighed against his mouth, her free hand coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palm as fast as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Tonight," he said quietly. "Tonight, if you're willing, I'd like to move my things into our room. No more separate beds. No more pretending this is just an arrangement." "Yes," Sarah breathed. "Yes, I'm willing." A sound from the doorway made them jump apart. Emma stood there, arms crossed, and wearing a knowing smirk. "Finally," the little girl said. "Thomas owes me 2 bits. I told him you'd figure it out before Sunday." Cole and Sarah looked at each other and burst out laughing. "You two bet on us?" Sarah asked, torn between amusement and exasperation. "Of course we did," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You were being ridiculous. Everyone could see you loved each other except you." Later that afternoon, while the children were occupied with their lessons at the kitchen table, Cole asked Sarah to come with him to the barn. She followed him, curious, pulling her shawl tight against the cold. Inside the barn, it was warmer, the smell of hay and horses familiar and comforting. Cole led her to the back, where a tarp covered something large and rectangular. "I've been working on this," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "In the evenings, after everyone's asleep, I wanted, well, you'll see." He pulled off the tarp, revealing a beautiful hope chest made of smooth pine. The wood was lovingly sanded and finished, and on the lid he'd carved a delicate pattern of wildflowers. Sarah gasped, running her fingers over the intricate carving. "Cole, this is beautiful. When did you—" "I started it the week you arrived," he admitted, "before I even knew if you'd stay. I wanted you to have something that was yours, something to keep your treasures in." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes as she examined the chest more closely. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly the work of many hours. "The flowers," she said, tracing the carved petals. "These are the same ones my mother used to grow in her garden back home." "I know. Emma told me." Cole shifted his weight, looking uncertain. Do you like it?" Instead of answering, Sarah threw her arms around his neck, standing on her toes to kiss him. Cole caught her easily, lifting her slightly off her feet as he returned the kiss with enthusiasm. "I love it," she murmured against his lips. I love you, Cole." She felt him go still, his arms tightening around her. When he pulled back to look at her face, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Say that again," he requested, his voice hoarse. "I love you," Sarah repeated, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other, but I do. I love you." Cole set her down gently, his hands framing her face. "I love you too, Sarah. God help me. I think I started falling in love with you that first day, when you were so fierce about protecting those children despite being hurt and freezing. You were the bravest thing I'd ever seen." They stood there in the barn, holding each other as snow began to fall outside, and Sarah felt the last of her fears melt away. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. This wasn't just safety and security. This was love. Real, true, unexpected love. That evening, after a supper filled with knowing glances from Emma and excited chatter from Thomas about his roping practice, Cole helped Sarah move her few belongings into what was now truly their room. The children had been suspiciously helpful about getting ready for bed early, with Emma practically pushing Thomas up the ladder to the loft. "Good night," Emma called down cheerfully. "Don't worry about us. We're fine up here. Very fine. Very asleep, eventually." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "Those children are too smart for their own good." "They are," Cole agreed, closing the door to their bedroom. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, more intimate. "Sarah, if you're not ready—" "I'm ready," she said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she unpinned her hair. "I'm nervous, but I'm ready. I trust you, Cole." He moved closer, his hands gentle as he helped her with the remaining pins, letting her dark hair fall around her shoulders. "You're so beautiful," he murmured. "I'll be careful with you, I promise." I know you will, Sarah whispered, reaching up to touch his face. That's why I'm not afraid. Cole took his time with her, patient and tender, making sure she felt cherished and safe. And when Sarah finally fell asleep in his arms hours later, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Cole already awake, watching her with a soft expression on his face. "Good morning, wife," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good morning, husband," she replied, warmth spreading through her chest at the words. They lay there for a few minutes, just enjoying the quiet intimacy, until they heard the children stirring in the loft. "I suppose we should get up," Sarah said reluctantly. "I suppose," Cole agreed, but made no move to release her. "Though I'm tempted to stay right here all day," Sarah laughed, swatting his chest playfully. "The animals need feeding, the children need breakfast, and you have work to do. Practical as always," he teased, but finally let her go. Over the following weeks, life on the Barrett Ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children thrived under Cole's patient guidance and Sarah's loving care. Thomas became more confident each day, his skills with a rope improving until Cole declared him good enough to help with the cattle come spring. Emma helped Sarah with the household chores and planning the garden, already imagining the vegetables and flowers they'd plant. But it was the growing intimacy between Cole and Sarah that transformed the house from a shelter into a true home. They learned each other's habits and preferences, their morning routines becoming a synchronized dance. Cole would start the fire while Sarah put on the coffee. She would cook breakfast while he tended the animals. They would eat together as a family, then divide the day's tasks between them. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, they would sit by the fire together. Sometimes they talked about their pasts, Sarah sharing memories of her mother, Cole slowly opening up about Anne and Emily. Other times, they would discuss their plans for the ranch, their hopes for the children's futures, their dreams of the life they were building together. And at night, in the privacy of their room, they would come together with growing passion and tenderness, learning what brought each other pleasure, building a physical intimacy that matched the emotional bond growing between them. One evening in late February, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Cole cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said, "about expanding the herd, maybe bringing in some better breeding stock. With Thomas getting old enough to help and the possibility of hiring on another hand or two, we could double our operation in a couple of years." Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "That sounds ambitious. Would we have enough grazing land?" "I'd need to purchase the adjoining 40 acres from the Hendersons. They're looking to sell anyway, getting too old to work the land." He paused. "It would be a risk, use up most of our savings, but I think it would pay off in the long run." "Our savings," Sarah repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Cole took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Everything I have is yours, Sarah. You know that." "I do. Just as everything I have is yours," she smiled, "which admittedly isn't much, but still." "You've given me more than you know," Cole said seriously. "You've given me a reason to dream again, to plan for the future instead of just existing day to day. Before you came, I was just going through the motions. Now I want to build something we can pass on to the children someday." Sarah's heart swelled with love for this man who had taken them in and given them not just shelter but a future. "Then I say we do it. Buy the land, expand the herd, build our dream together." Cole grinned, that rare, beautiful smile that transformed his weathered face. "Together," he agreed, pulling her close and kissing her soundly, until the night Thomas got sick. It started with a cough on a Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, the boy was feverish and weak. Sarah tended to him constantly, barely sleeping, her face drawn with worry. Cole tried to help where he could, but he found himself paralyzed with old fear. The sound of Thomas's labored breathing brought back memories of Emily's final days, of standing helplessly by while his daughter slipped away. "Cole!" Sarah's voice cut through his panic. She was standing in the doorway of Thomas's room, her face exhausted but determined. "I need you to ride to town and fetch the doctor. Thomas is getting worse." He nodded, grateful for something concrete to do, and saddled his horse in record time. The ride to town and back with Doc Henderson took 3 hours, 3 hours during which Cole prayed harder than he'd prayed in 5 years. "Please," he thought, "not again. I can't lose another child. Even if he's not mine by blood, he's mine now, please." Doc Henderson examined Thomas thoroughly while Cole and Sarah waited downstairs, too anxious to sit still. Emma had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhausted from worrying about her brother. Finally, the doctor came down. "It's pneumonia," he said bluntly, "but we caught it early. Keep him warm, make him drink plenty of fluids, and he should pull through just fine. He's strong and he's young. The odds are in his favor." Sarah's knees buckled with relief, and Cole caught her automatically, pulling her against his chest. She clung to him, her body shaking with silent sobs. "Thank you, Doctor," Cole managed, his own voice rough with emotion. After Doc Henderson left, with instructions to call him back if Thomas worsened, Cole helped Sarah upstairs. She insisted on staying with Thomas, pulling a chair up beside his bed. "You need to rest," Cole said gently. "You've barely slept in 2 days." "I can't leave him," she whispered. "What if he gets worse? What if—" "Then I'll stay too," Cole said firmly. He pulled another chair up on the opposite side of the bed. "We'll both watch over him." Through that long night, they took turns dozing and keeping vigil. Sometimes they talked in quiet voices about nothing important, the weather, the cattle, plans for spring planting. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, just being present for Thomas and for each other. Around 3 in the morning, with Thomas sleeping peacefully and the worst of the fever broken, Sarah spoke. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "All I could think was that I'd already lost Mama. I couldn't lose him too. I couldn't do that to Emma. I couldn't—" Her voice broke. Cole reached across the bed and took her hand. "But you didn't lose him. He's going to be fine. This time," Sarah said. "But what about next time? What if something happens and I can't protect them? What if I'm not enough?" "Sarah," Cole waited until she looked at him. "You are enough. More than enough. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. That's what I'm here for. That's what family is." "Family," she repeated softly, and something in her expression shifted. "Is that what we are? Aren't we?" Cole asked. "Maybe we started as strangers. Maybe this marriage was just a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way, you 3 became my family. Thomas and Emma are like my own children, and you and me," she prompted when he trailed off. Cole took a deep breath, knowing he was about to cross the line they'd carefully maintained. But watching Thomas fight for his life had reminded him that tomorrow wasn't promised. Some things were worth the risk. "You're my wife, Sarah, in every way that matters to me. I know we agreed this was just an arrangement, but I can't pretend anymore. I care about you, more than I probably should." Sarah's eyes widened, and in the dim lamplight, he saw hope flare there. "Cole, Thomas stirred, mumbling in his sleep, and the moment broke. Sarah turned her attention back to her brother, checking his temperature with a gentle hand on his forehead. "His fever's down even more," she said, relief evident in her voice. "That's good." Cole stood, knowing they both needed some rest. "You should try to sleep. I'll watch him for a while." "Cole, wait!" Sarah rose and caught his hand. Standing close to him in the dim room, she seemed small and fragile, though he knew she was anything but. "What you said about caring for me. You don't have to respond," Cole said quickly, suddenly afraid he'd pushed too hard. "I know this wasn't part of our agreement. If you want things to stay as they are, I'll respect that. But what if I don't want them to stay as they are?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. Cole's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" She took a shaky breath. "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just an arrangement for me too. You've been so good to us, Cole, so patient and kind. You make me feel safe in a way I've never felt before. And when I look at you, I don't see a stranger or a business partner. I see my husband. And I want this marriage to be real." For a long moment, Cole just stared at her, afraid he'd misheard. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached up and cupped her face in his hand. His thumb brushed across her cheek, and she leaned into his touch. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I don't want you to feel pressured or—" Sarah stopped him by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. Unlike their brief wedding kiss, this was longer, deeper, full of all the feelings they'd been holding back. Cole's arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted against him with a soft sigh. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah smiled up at him. "I'm sure," she whispered. "Thank God," Cole murmured, and kissed her again. They were interrupted by Thomas's sleepy voice. "Are you two kissing?" Sarah jumped back, blushing furiously, while Cole couldn't help but grin. The boy was lying in bed with his eyes half open, looking more amused than feverish. "Yes," Cole said honestly. "Is that all right with you?" Thomas considered this. "I guess. Does this mean you're going to be our real pa now?" Cole's throat tightened. "If you want me to be." "Emma and I talked about it," Thomas said matter-of-factly. "We think you're pretty good at it already. So yeah, we want you to be our pa." Sarah made a small sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You two discussed this?" "Emma said you'd been making eyes at each other for weeks," Thomas explained. "She was wondering when you'd figure it out." Cole laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt rusty from disuse, but good. "Your sister is a smart girl." "She really is," Sarah agreed, wiping tears from her eyes. "Now you, young man, need to go back to sleep. Doctor's orders." Thomas obediently closed his eyes, but not before adding, "I'm glad you're staying, Pa." Pa. The word hit Cole square in the chest, filling all the empty spaces that had been there for 5 years. He wasn't replacing Emily, no one could ever do that. But he was being given a second chance at fatherhood, at family, at love. "Me too, son," he said softly. "Me too." After Thomas fell back asleep, Cole walked Sarah to her room. Their room now. They'd agreed without words. At the door, he kissed her forehead gently. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll talk more in the morning." "Cole?" she said, as he turned to go. "Yes?" "I love you." The words hung in the air, precious and unexpected. Cole's heart felt too big for his chest. "I love you too, Sarah, more than I thought I'd ever love anyone again." He went back to the spare room, but not to sleep. Instead, he sat by the window and watched the sun rise over his land, their land, and thought about second chances, about how the worst storm of the season had brought 3 frozen, desperate people to his door, about how an act of simple kindness had turned into the family he thought he'd lost forever, about how sometimes, when you were brave enough to open your heart again, life gave you something even more beautiful than what you'd lost. Thomas recovered over the next week, growing stronger each day. During that time, the dynamic in the household shifted naturally. Cole moved his things into the main bedroom, and he and Sarah began sharing not just a house, but a life, in every sense. The first night they truly spent together as husband and wife, Cole was nervous as a green boy. Sarah was too, he could tell, though she tried to hide it. But they took their time, gentle with each other, and what they shared was tender and right. Afterward, lying in bed with Sarah's head on his chest and her hand over his heart, Cole felt a peace he hadn't known in 5 years. "I never thought I'd have this again," he admitted into the darkness. "After Anne and Emily died, I thought that part of my life was over." Sarah's fingers traced patterns on his chest. "Do you ever feel guilty for being happy again?" It was a perceptive question, and Cole considered it carefully. "Sometimes," he said honestly, "but I think Anne would be glad. She used to tell me that love isn't finite, that you don't run out of it by giving it away. I loved her and Emily with everything I had. That doesn't mean I can't love you and Thomas and Emma the same way." "I feel the same about Mama," Sarah said softly. "I miss her terribly. But I'm also grateful that before she died, I got to tell her I'd found someone good, someone who would take care of us. I think she died a little easier knowing we wouldn't be alone." "She raised a remarkable daughter," Cole murmured, pressing a kiss to Sarah's hair. "And you're a remarkable man, Cole Barrett. Even if you are too stubborn to accept a compliment." He chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest. "Is that so?" "Absolutely." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the moonlight. "You took in 3 strangers during a blizzard. You offered us your home, your name, your protection. You treat Thomas and Emma like they're your own children. You make me feel cherished and safe and loved. If that's not remarkable, I don't know what is." Cole reached up and traced the line of her jaw with his finger. "You make it sound noble. Truth is, I was selfish. I saw a chance to not be alone anymore, and I took it." "Then we were both selfish," Sarah said, leaning down to kiss him. "And I'm glad we were." As winter turned to spring, the Barrett Ranch flourished in ways it hadn't in years. Cole taught Thomas to ride properly, and the boy proved to be a natural horseman. Emma helped Sarah start a garden, and soon they had vegetables sprouting in neat rows. The cattle thrived, and Cole hired on 2 ranch hands to help with the growing operation. The people of Redemption Creek, who'd initially been surprised by Cole's sudden marriage, gradually accepted the Barrett family. Sarah made friends friends among the other ranch wives. The children went to school in town, and Cole found himself part of a community again instead of an outsider looking in. March brought warmer weather and the first real test of their expanded operation. Cole had purchased the Henderson property as planned, and now they had cattle spread across 140 acres. It meant longer days and harder work, but Cole had never been happier. Sarah had settled into her role as ranch wife with surprising ease. She managed the household with quiet efficiency, kept the books for the ranch, and somehow still found time to help with the cattle when needed. She could ride nearly as well as Cole now, and she'd learned to rope well enough to help with branding. One afternoon in early April, Cole came in from the fields to find Sarah in the kitchen with several other ranch wives. They were gathered around the table, working on a quilt and chattering like magpies. "Cole," Mrs. Henderson called out, "we were just telling Sarah about the spring dance next month. You'll bring her, won't you?" Cole caught Sarah's eye, saw the hope there mixed with nervousness. "If Sarah wants to go, we'll be there," he said. "Of course I want to go," Sarah replied, her smile bright. "I haven't been to a dance since—" She trailed off, the smile fading slightly. "Since before your mama got sick," Mrs. Patterson finished gently. "All the more reason to go now, dear. It'll do you good." After the ladies left, Sarah busied herself cleaning up the tea things. Cole watched her, noting the tension in her shoulders. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," he said quietly. "I know crowds can be hard." "It's not that," Sarah said, not meeting his eyes. "It's just, I don't have anything suitable to wear. My good dress is years old and too small now. I can't go looking like a beggar." Cole moved closer, turning her to face him. "Sarah, you could wear a flour sack and still be the most beautiful woman there." She laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "You're sweet to say so. But no buts. Tomorrow we're going into town and getting you a new dress. A proper one, fit for a dance." "Cole, that's too much. We need to make sure my wife has what she needs," he interrupted firmly, "including a dress for the spring dance." No arguments. Sarah's protests died as she saw the determination in his eyes. Instead, she threw her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." The next day they made the trip to town with the children. While Thomas and Emma explored the general store with strict instructions not to break anything, Cole led Sarah to the dressmaker's shop. Mrs. Chen, the dressmaker, was a small Chinese woman with sharp eyes and nimble fingers. She took one look at Sarah and smiled. "You need dress for spring dance, yes? I make you beautiful." For the next hour, Sarah was measured and draped in various fabrics, while Mrs. Chen made notes and suggestions. Cole sat in the corner, watching his wife's face light up as she looked at silks and satins and fine cottons. "The blue," he said suddenly, pointing to a bolt of fabric the color of a summer sky. "That one." Mrs. Chen pulled it out, draping it over Sarah's shoulder. Against her dark hair and fair skin, it was stunning. "Oh," Sarah breathed, touching the fabric reverently. "It's beautiful, but Cole—" "We'll take it," Cole told Mrs. Chen. "Can you have it ready in 3 weeks?" "For you? 2 weeks," Mrs. Chen said with a wink. "You good man, good husband. Your wife deserved beautiful dress." On the way home, with the promise of a new dress secured and the children chattering excitedly in the back of the wagon, Sarah leaned against Cole's shoulder. "You spoil me," she said softly. "I like spoiling you," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Get used to it." The weeks leading up to the dance flew by in a flurry of activity. The ranch work kept Cole busy from dawn to dusk, but he always made time for the children and Sarah. Thomas was learning to read better, and Cole would spend evenings helping him with his letters. Emma had developed a passion for drawing, and Cole had bought her a set of colored pencils that she treasured. And Sarah bloomed like one of the flowers in her garden. She was happier than Cole had ever seen her, always singing as she worked, always ready with a smile or a kiss when he came in from the fields. The night of the dance arrived clear and warm, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. Sarah emerged from their bedroom in her new dress, and Cole's breath caught. The blue fabric hugged her curves before flaring out at the waist in soft folds. Mrs. Chen had added delicate white embroidery at the neckline and sleeves, and Sarah had pinned her hair up in a style that showed off her graceful neck. "Well?" she asked nervously, doing a small turn. "Will I do?" "You'll do more than that." Cole managed, his voice rough. "You're going to be the most beautiful woman there, and every man is going to envy me." Sarah blushed, pleased. "And you look very handsome yourself, Mr. Barrett." Cole had worn his best suit, the one he'd been married in, with a new string tie Sarah had made him. Together, with the children dressed in their Sunday best, they made a striking family. The dance was held in the town hall, already crowded when they arrived. Music spilled out into the street, fiddles and guitars playing a lively tune. Inside, lanterns hung from the rafters, casting everything in a warm, golden glow. Sarah's hand tightened on Cole's arm as they entered, but she kept her chin up and her smile in place. Several people turned to look, and Cole heard the whispers. "That's Sarah Barrett now," someone murmured. "Don't she look fine?" Cole Barrett's wife. Never thought we'd see the day he'd marry again. Cole felt Sarah stiffen, but he squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They're just curious. Give them something to really talk about." As with that, he led her onto the dance floor, pulling her into his arms as a waltz began. Sarah followed his lead perfectly, her body fitting against his like they'd been dancing together for years. "I didn't know you could dance," she said, surprised. "Anne taught me," Cole admitted. "Said a man should know how to dance with his wife. I was terrible at first, but she was patient." Sarah smiled up at him. "I'm glad she taught you, and I'm glad I get to dance with you now." They spun across the floor, and Cole watched as Sarah's nervousness melted away, replaced by pure joy. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkling, and when she laughed at something he said, the sound made his heart soar. Other couples joined them on the floor, and soon the whole hall was spinning with dancers. Cole saw Thomas dancing with Emma, the boy taking his role as older brother seriously as he carefully guided his sister through the steps. He saw the ranch hands he'd hired dancing with local girls, and the older couples moving with the ease of long practice. But his eyes always came back to Sarah, his wife, his love. When the waltz ended, they were immediately surrounded by people wanting to congratulate them on their marriage, to meet the children, to welcome the Barrett family properly into the community. Sarah handled it all with grace, accepting compliments and making polite conversation. Cole stayed close, his hand on the small of her back, a silent support. "Mrs. Barrett," Reverend Matthews approached with his wife, "I must say marriage clearly agrees with you. I've never seen you looking better." "Thank you, Reverend," Sarah replied warmly. "Cole has been very good to us." "And you to him, I imagine," Mrs. Matthews added with a knowing smile. "It's good to see Cole happy again. The whole town is pleased." As the evening wore on, Cole danced with Sarah again and again, only stopping when the children needed attention or when Sarah wanted to rest. During one of their breaks, sitting on a bench along the wall, Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "This is perfect," she murmured. "Absolutely perfect." "It is," Cole agreed, wrapping his arm around her. "Though I'll be even happier when we get home and I can get you out of that dress." Sarah's cheeks flamed red, but she laughed. "Cole Barrett, such scandalous talk." "Just being honest," he said with a grin. "Can't help it if my wife is so beautiful I can't think straight." They stayed until the dance ended near midnight, then loaded two very tired children into the wagon for the ride home. Thomas fell asleep almost immediately, his head on Emma's shoulder. Emma managed to stay awake a bit longer, but her eyes were drooping by the time they reached the ranch. Cole carried Thomas inside while Sarah helped Emma, and together they tucked the children into their beds in the loft. Standing at the top of the ladder, looking down at the two sleeping forms, Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "What is it?" Cole asked, seeing her expression. "I was just thinking," she said softly, "how different our lives are now from what they were 6 months ago. How much better. We were lost and alone, and now," she gestured at the sleeping children, at the comfortable home around them, "now we have everything." Cole pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We do, and it's only going to get better, I promise you that." They made their way down the ladder and to their own room. True to his word, Cole helped Sarah out of her beautiful blue dress, his hands gentle on the buttons and laces. But there was heat in his eyes, and when Sarah turned to face him in just her chemise and petticoats, his breath hitched. "God, you're beautiful," he breathed, reaching for her. Sarah went into his arms willingly, all thoughts of the dance, the town, everything else fading away. There was only this, only him, only them together. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Sarah traced idle patterns on Cole's chest. Cole, I'm happy, truly completely happy. I wanted you to know that. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips to press a kiss to her palm. I'm happy too, Sarah. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. You've given me that. We've given it to each other, she corrected. That's what makes it so perfect. As spring deepened into summer, the rhythm of ranch life continued. The cattle were moved to summer pasture, the garden produced abundance of vegetables, and the children grew like weeds in sun. Thomas had shot up nearly 2 inches, and his voice was starting to crack in that awkward way of boys becoming young men. He worked alongside Cole every day now, learning the business of running a ranch from the ground up. Cole was patient with him, teaching him not just the physical skills, but the business side too. How to judge the quality of cattle, when to sell, how to negotiate a fair price. Emma, meanwhile, had discovered a talent for working with the chickens. She'd increased their flock to 20 birds and was selling eggs in town every week, carefully saving her earnings in a jar in the kitchen. She talked about maybe getting a milk cow someday, about making butter and cheese to sell alongside the eggs. She's got a head for business, that one, Cole observed one evening as he and Sarah sat on the porch, watching the children play with the now fully grown dog in the yard. She does, Sarah agreed proudly. Sometimes I think she's smarter than all of us combined, Cole chuckled. Wouldn't surprise me. Thomas has the harder head, but Emma has the sharper mind. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the cool evening breeze. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice soft and almost hesitant. Cole, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it, taking us in? Your life was so much simpler before we came along. Cole turned to look at her, his expression serious. Not for one single second. Sarah, you and the children are the best thing that's ever happened to me. You saved my life just as surely as I saved yours that day in the blizzard. But we've complicated everything. You've made everything better, he interrupted firmly. This ranch was just a place before. Now it's a home. I was just existing before. Now I'm living. Don't ever doubt that you belong here, Sarah. This is your home, our home. And I thank God every day that you walked into my life. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you, Cole Barrett. I love you too, Sarah Barrett, more than I can ever properly say. One evening in late April, after a particularly long day of work, Cole came in to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table with Thomas and Emma, working on their arithmetic lessons. Thomas and Emma were playing with a new puppy, a surprise Cole had brought home the week before. Sarah was sitting in the rocking chair he'd built for her, her hand resting on her stomach with a secret smile on her face. You look pleased with yourself, Mrs. Barrett, Cole observed, climbing the porch steps. I have reason to be, Mr. Barrett, she replied. Come here. He sat on the porch rail in front of her, and she took his hand, pressing it against her belly. I saw Doc Henderson in town today, she said softly. He confirmed what I suspected. We're going to have a baby, Cole. In October. For a moment, Cole couldn't breathe. A baby. Their baby. A new life created from the love they'd built together. Are you sure? He managed. Very sure. Sarah's eyes searched his face anxiously. Are you happy about it? Happy didn't begin to cover what Cole felt. He dropped to his knees in front of the rocking chair, pulled Sarah into his arms, and buried his face against her shoulder. I never thought I'd have this chance again, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Another child, a family, Sarah, We're going to have a baby, Emma shrieked, having overheard. She and Thomas jumped around excitedly, the puppy barking and trying to join in. Cole laughed through his tears, pulling back to look at Sarah's glowing face. You've given me everything, he told her. A home, a family, a reason to live. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. You already are, Sarah said, cupping his face in her hands. You always have been, from that first day in the storm, when you could have ridden past but stopped instead. You saved us, Cole, and we saved you too. You did, he agreed. You all did. That night, after the children had finally calmed down enough to sleep, Cole lay in bed with Sarah, his hand resting protectively on her stomach where their child was growing. What should we name the baby? Sarah asked sleepily. If it's a girl, I'd like to call her Anne Emily, Cole said. After my first wife and daughter, if that's all right with you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I think that's perfect. And if it's a boy, we'll figure it out together," Cole said. "We've got time." "We do," Sarah agreed, snuggling closer. "We have all the time in the world." As he drifted off to sleep with his wife in his arms and his family safe under his roof, Cole thought back to that day in the blizzard. He'd been on his way home from town, planning to ride straight past whoever was foolish enough to be out in the storm. But something had made him stop. Something had made him look closer at that small, desperate group. And in that moment, 3 strangers had become his second chance at everything he thought he'd lost. "Our mom died last night," Sarah had said. "We have nowhere to go." What he'd done next, offering shelter, protection, love, had changed all their lives forever. He'd given them a home. They'd given him a reason to live again. Sometimes, Cole reflected as sleep finally claimed him, the best things in life came from the worst storms. You just had to be brave enough to open your door when someone knocked. And he was so glad he had. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Cole paced outside the bedroom door while Doc Henderson attended to Sarah. Thomas and Emma waited downstairs with Mrs. Henderson, too anxious to sit still. The labor had started before dawn, and it was now nearly noon. Cole had assisted with countless carvings and folings over the years, but this was different. This was Sarah, his wife, the woman he loved more than his own life, and he was completely useless, banned from the room while she did the hard work. Finally he heard it, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn baby. His knees nearly gave out with relief. Doc Henderson opened the door, grinning. "Congratulations, Cole. You have a healthy son." And Sarah did beautifully. Cole barely heard the rest, pushing past the doctor to get to his wife. Sarah was propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt her mother had made years ago. "Cole," she said softly, "come meet your son." He approached the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the infant in her arms. The baby had stopped crying and was staring up at him with dark blue eyes, his tiny fist pressed against his mouth. "He's perfect," Cole breathed. "Sarah, he's absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Sarah asked. With trembling hands, Cole took his son, cradling the small, warm weight against his chest. The baby was so tiny, so fragile, and yet already so loved. Cole felt his eyes burn with tears. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your pa, and I promise you, I'm going to do everything in my power to give you a good life. You, your mama, your brother, and your sister, you're my whole world." Thomas and Emma burst into the room then, unable to wait any longer, and crowded around to see their new brother. The puppy, now considerably bigger, tried to follow but was blocked by Doc Henderson. "What are you going to name him?" Emma asked, peering at the baby with fascination. Cole looked at Sarah, raising an eyebrow in question. They'd discussed several names but hadn't settled on one. "Thomas," Sarah said softly, looking at her younger brother. "After your mama's father and after your brave brother here. Thomas James Barrett." The boy's face lit up. "Really? You're naming him after me?" "We are," Cole confirmed. "We're naming him after family, because that's what we are. All of us together, a family." And standing there in that sun-filled bedroom, holding his newborn son, while his wife smiled up at him and his other children pressed close, Cole Barrett knew that he was the luckiest man alive. He'd lost everything once, and thought he'd never recover. But life had given him a second chance wrapped in a blizzard, delivered by a desperate young woman and 2 frightened children who needed him as much as he needed them. They'd all been broken in their own ways, but together they'd healed. Together they'd become whole. And together they'd built something better than Cole had ever imagined possible. A home, a family, and a love that would last forever.